Lachlan,
Howdy.
and Ruben.
Hi.
Now, those of you who have the unfortunate pleasure of watching our heads every week, you will spot that I am wearing the hat that we wore in the first episode. Not because I've run out of hats, but because I strongly believe that tonight we are finishing this book. And we are coming full circle. So I have the hat on. In this book, I wrote the date that I started reading this book for this show at the start of the first chapter, which is the 24th of July 2021, and
Wow.
I finished reading it today at 4:06 p.m. on the 6th of February 2022, which I wrote in the back of the book. So certainly not a fast read, but certainly knowledge earned rather than junk food knowledge is my thoughts. How about you, Lachlan?
Mate, you got to take your time and savor the flavour, right? So,
Do you agree, Ruben? It's knowledge earned.
Yeah, I think we've given it its due, considering the place that it occupies in the Western classics. I think there's nothing wrong giving it a bit of extra time.
Yeah, agree. It also makes me wonder how people read the Bible in a year in a meaningful way. Like, I've always seen those read the Bible in a year programs where you read, I think it's on average 2.5 chapters a day. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to do that. When I go to reread the Bible again, I'm going to just take my time, and it might take the current run rate with this book, it might take me 20 years, but I think working through it like that is certainly more sensible for getting things out of it.
God, I think pretty much when we've been reading this book, it's pretty much read 2 paragraphs, stop, think about it, reread 2 paragraphs, make a couple of notes, move on, read some more. It is quite a long process. I mean, you could punch through this in no time, but I don't think you'd extract anywhere near as much as what we have. I mean, not that we're scholarly by any means, but just from a layman's perspective, trying to make sense of it. I think it's been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. How about you, Ruben?
Yeah, no, I've loved it. I reckon it's the way to do it. If you're going to read something like this, take the time to get as much out of it as you can. And the way we've done it too has been fun, because we're just taking our time with it and enjoying it and arguing about it, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
I think we've all seen different sort of aspects to it as well, as we've been talking about it. Sometimes, we'll miss certain things and we'll talk about it and go, we'd pick up on that particular thing while I was reading it. So it's been fun to do. This is the alternate name for this podcast, Ruben's Book Club. So.
You may not want to let me choose the next one.
Well, we'll figure that out closer to the night. But before we proceed, we cannot break tradition. So I'm about to pour myself. I am going to have a glass of Kraken, and
Excellent.
I'm pouring that on camera right now because that is delicious. Now, what I'm going to do, gentlemen, before the next episode is rewatch the introductions to all the last episodes and document what we drank every week, and then figure out what our preferred beverage was per person as well as collectively.
I'm pretty sure I could guess mine.
All right, well, let's have an experiment. What do you think yours is?
It'll be a G&T for sure.
Okay.
There have been a few different gins though. I'll say that much. So maybe you'll have to get specific on there, Tim.
I don't think I'll drill down to the brand specifically, but I think you're onto something. How about you, Ruben? What do you think yours will be?
Oh, I reckon it's going to come in pretty close between the gin and tonics and the spiced rums, but I think the gin and tonics are probably going to edge it out, but I'm not sure. It's about 50-50, I reckon.
It was the flavour of COVID, I think, G&T.
It tasted like COVID to me. That's why I only had it once. But I'm not sure what it'll be for me.
That's the problem, mate.
I think for me it might be beer, but I'm not sure. Could be whiskey, could be rum. I've been a bit all over the shop with it, so who knows?
Well, I feel really bad because I wasn't organised this week, and I haven't got a drink. I have got a bottle of wine in the pantry I can go crack open, but it's corked. So if I don't finish it, I got to jam the cork back in there, which is a pain in the butt. So I don't know. Should I just pop off and open it up, considering it's the last episode?
Yes, I will pause and we will resume once you have a drink.
Right, I'll go grab
Pausing
it.
now. Pausing now. All right, pausing now. And through the magic of technology, Ruben now has a drink in his hand.
I do.
What is said drink?
It's a Campo Viejo Original. I'm sure I'm saying all that entirely wrong, but it's a Tempranillo, and I think it might be Spanish.
Tempranillo?
Tempranillo?
That's a Spanish variety of grape, but they do them in Australia.
It's got a map on the bottle, and it looks like Spain. So there you go. It's intense, complex, and fruity.
Just like you.
Fruity.
Did you just call me fruity?
Oh yes, I've often thought that's often a descriptive word that comes to mind for Ruben is fruity.
It's not something anyone would call you in person anyway.
Yeah, intense and complex. I'll take that as a compliment. I don't know about the fruity.
Tongue in cheek, my friend.
Indeed. All right. Well, did you know that the soul is immortal? Now, for those of you who are reading, you'll know that I've just chucked a Socrates, like just bringing up something very randomly, seemingly. So I reckon we get into the next part of this chapter 10. What did you guys think when you read that? Because
certainly.
It's hilarious. So he literally finishes talking about what we spoke about last week, which is basically he doesn't like people who tell stories.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a minute. And then it just suddenly goes, are you not aware that the soul of man is immortal and imperishable?
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
I still reckon that stuff about. Yeah, I still reckon that stuff from last week about him just want to have one last dig at the poets. It does. I think it still feels out of place. I reckon what's happened, because there were plays written about Socrates, and they made him sound like a sophist. So the poets didn't really like him. I reckon that when Plato wrote this, he sort of just jammed that little bit there in the end. One last FU to the poets or something.
I reckon you're onto something.
Could be.
But yeah, because then he goes on to talk about the immortal soul, which fits in perfectly with where they left off before they started talking about the poets again. Because before that, they were sort of just wrapping it all up.
Yeah, for sure. It's quite funny too. It's just, I think Glaucon, by the sound of this, was as surprised as we were that he all of a sudden just drops back into the chat and soul again, because he seems quite taken aback when Socrates sort of drops this bomb and tells him to prove it, which Socrates says is going to be easy. If anyone told me that proving that the soul was immortal was easy, I'd call them a liar.
Maybe he's just confident because he just nailed justice after 9 chapters.
Maybe.
He's like, oh, we got this. This is easy. This is like making Star Wars 7, 8, and 9. What could go wrong?
Everything.
Everything could go wrong.
Yeah. So so he asks Socrates to prove it, and Socrates kind of kicks off saying that, and they'd talked about this before, that with everything there is a good and evil associated with it, and so like a corrupting and destroying element, and corrupting and destroying is obviously the evil element, and the saving and improving element is the good. So he gives a few sort of different examples of that just in other kind of things around the place. So he's saying like rust is the evil to metal, and rot is the evil to timber, mildew of corn, etc., etc. Which I think we can all kind of follow along with. That has some logic to it. And basically what he's sort of saying is that the vice and the evil inherent for that particular item will destroy it. So rust destroys the metal in the end, right? And if that evil does not destroy them, then nothing will, is what Socrates says in any case. Or in any
That's
case,
where he heads with it, isn't it?
good will not destroy them. But look, it's a bit of a leap to take there. That nothing will destroy them if the inherent evil doesn't destroy them. Obviously, like it's fine when you're talking figuratively about steel and whatnot, but we're talking about the soul here, which is what he's sort of leading to.
Yeah, as a Christian person, it's not a surprising statement for me to read that the soul is immortal, because that's something that Christianity says too.
Well, that's fine on faith, but he says he can prove it.
Yeah,
and
but then, hilariously, he decides to use a story to prove it, after bagging out people who use stories to prove things.
that is true.
I just think that's hilarious.
I'm not sure he's presenting that myth as a proof, though. I think I thought he tagged that on the end more as like a way of explaining what he's trying to say, rather than presenting it as a proof.
I thought he was using it as a proof because he's quoting like the only person he's aware of who has died and then come back to life. You know what I mean? Like he's using it as like a factual report as opposed to something like Homer.
Yeah, that's not
maybe
the way
right.
I read it
I
at
hadn't
all.
thought about it that way. Yeah.
I wonder.
You might be right. But we'll save the story.
Yeah.
We can talk about the story. So anyway, he sort of set the scene a little bit with that whole part about the so there's an inherent evil and all that sort of thing for every item. So then he sort of leads that to talk about the soul now. And so he's saying, well, could the soul itself be corrupted or destroyed by the behaviors of an unjust man? And would that actually destroy the soul? More or less, Socrates doesn't believe so, because that's not the evil of the soul. That's something sort of external to it. So I think he used the example of food that was decomposing, and that if you ate the food that was decomposing, it wouldn't necessarily make you decompose, right? That was the evil of the food, not the evil of your body, so to speak. So saying the two things aren't sort of directly sort of aligned. Is that how you guys took it?
Yeah, that part, 100%.
Yep.
It was a little bit of a convoluted way to sort of get to there, but it was. I think that was the point he was trying to make. Is that bearing in mind 2,500 years ago,
Sure.
Our understanding of germs and that sort of stuff has moved on a little bit, but the principle, I get what he's saying. Did you follow it, Ruben?
Yes.
I had to read it a bunch of times before it sunk in. I'm still not really sure if I fully understand it. I think, I don't know. Like, I think you got to take it step by step and sort of see if you actually agree with each section. And I'm not sure whether I 100% agree with any of the sections. So I found this really strange. But so to start with, you've got to accept that each thing that exists has something that has an evil that's unique to that thing.
Yeah.
But you've got to forget. This is where I got confused. You can't. When he says an evil, he defines it. So we're not thinking evil like a moral evil, like we would ordinarily use the word these days. He's just saying
Something
it's just
bad.
a thing that. But then he's very specific about the fact that what is the evil to one thing, what destroys one thing can't destroy another thing, because that thing that destroys it's unique to it. And I think the reason he draws that distinction is he goes, well, what kills the body can't kill the soul.
Yeah, I think he's working his formula backwards from the answer.
Yeah, that's right. So from there he goes, well, what kills the body can't kill the soul. So when the body dies, there's no reason to think that the death of the body would destroy the soul, because the only thing that can destroy the soul are the things that he described earlier, like injustice and cowardice and things like that. So I don't know. I think if you accept his premises, like if you accept that, each thing has a thing that's unique to it that destroys it, which kind of seems true, I guess. Then I think it's a sound argument.
It's somewhat, but I mean, it's. I think in some sense you're suspending belief a little bit for the sake of the argument. The argument's logical, but it's not infallible.
But are the premises is correct? Is the question as well?
Yeah,
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 but I think where I thought I was kind of on board, but where I got a little bit iffy is that he basically says, okay, so you've got these, moral. So the thing that kills the soul are these moral evils, basically, like injustice and cowardice and things like that. So to me, I'm like, oh, that kind of acts like a poison, right? It damages the soul. So if the body dies and the soul lives on, but you've
yep.
already committed these evils, who's to say that it doesn't continue to rot the soul to extinction after your death? That's the bit where I was like, I'm not sure. I don't know how you eliminate that possibility.
Well, I think to Tim's point, I think that might be where he's leaning on the story later on to back that up, and that maybe that's why maybe he seems so clear on drawing this conclusion. And before we were on camera, we are sort of talking about this, and it was kind of like I noticed that there didn't seem to be as much argument about this topic, whereas earlier in the book you would have had Thrasymachus or somebody jumping in and said, "That's bullshit, mate. Where'd you pull that conclusion from?" But we're just kind of like, I don't know. I was kind of making a joke maybe that it was kind of like they've all moved on to the bar because they're tired of Socrates' droning. Now it's just Socrates and Glaucon sitting there. That's why there's no arguments. So.
And Glaucon's a weird chap because he constantly says like he'll reverse his answer often. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh yeah, of course. Like he just does that over and over again.
Yep. It's so true. You just follow along.
I think he's right in the sense that, I mean, what kills, what destroys a piece of wood or, a piece of metal rust is not the same thing as what destroys wood is not the same thing that destroys rust. So you wouldn't expect it. You wouldn't expect to find metal that's moldy or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's correct, but it just feels like a really strange argument to me still.
Yeah, look, I think the argument makes sense if you've already decided that the soul and the body are two separate things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
If you're trying to prove the point that they're separate, it's probably a bit harder.
Yeah, and I think he does kind of try to address that in the bit where he talks about, like if you eat rotten food, what is rotting the food is not what rots you, but it might make you sick, and then that causes disease, and then the disease is the evil of the body, but it still can't say it's the same thing as what was killing the corn or whatever.
Yeah.
Still, did my head in a bit. It was like very strange.
Yeah, I just went along with it. Like I got what he was trying to say, and I'm like, I don't 100% think that myself, but I comprehend what you're trying to say, and I'm happy to move forward.
Yeah, and understand the logic of your argument. Not gonna poke it too hard.
Yeah, I think I did a Thrasy Marcus by that stage. Just decided to keep going.
Let him go.
Yeah, no, we're nearly there. Just keep going. Stop arguing.
Yeah.
They wrap this piece up with a quick paragraph.
Is the crux of it? Oh, sorry. I think the crux of it, like the reason he's going here, though, he hints at right when they first start talking about it, and he's talking about a short span and a long span of things. He's like, just one lifetime's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Because it's a very short span. So I think that's why in his system of thought that the soul would have to be immortal, because then that would account for when you have somebody, because you could potentially have someone that does the right thing their whole life and have a horrible life.
Yeah.
So I think to account for that, there has to be an afterlife. There has to be a way for those things to play out over a longer period of time. So I think that's why he's so dead set on this idea of the soul being immortal, because then all of those things can play out and justice can be done eventually. And yeah, I guess that kind of bleeds into the story that he ended up telling, the myth of Ur or something like that.
Yeah. I'll just read that little paragraph that wraps this section up, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Either then let us refute this conclusion, or whilst it remains unrefuted, let us never say that fever or any other disease, or the knife put to the throat, or even the cutting up of the whole body into the minutest pieces can destroy the soul, until she herself is proved to become more unholy or unrighteous in consequence of these things being done to the body. But that the soul or anything else, if not destroyed by an internal evil, can be destroyed by an external one, is not to be affirmed by any man. I don't know if that actually makes it clearer, but that's just how they sort of wrap that one up.
Do you think he's just trying to really emphasize that the physical has nothing to do with the spiritual?
For sure, but then he starts sort of bringing in that there may still be sort of some consequence for the soul, which I guess he wasn't refuting earlier, though, either. But maybe they're just not quite sure exactly how that's how that's working. I guess they're just saying could be some internal evil or something like that, or they're saying it can't be affirmed by any man. So I guess it's up to the gods as to how the evil of the soul sort of plays out and destroys the soul.
Yep.
I did like what he goes on to say about, basically says, but what we're talking about, what we're observing, is the soul as it is in our life, as it's attached to the material world. And so we can't really see it clearly. And he tells some story about some sea creature that's picked up all of these barnacles and stuff and all these things hanging off. And until you actually pull it out of the water and all these things come off, you won't really see its true essence. I guess the implication there being we can only really see the state of the soul as it is conflicted in this life fully. And then from there, you go.
Yeah, look, I think that's where he starts to sort of talk about, well, at that point where they're talking about that, they've acknowledged that the soul and the body is two separate things, and that basically they're sort of saying it's hard for us with our human perspective to see the soul for what the soul is, because all we can see is the physical being, the body
conflicted within our own soul.
And that. Interestingly, the seaweed encrusted dude was a sea god Glaucus. I always like to look those things up.
Do you reckon Glaucon was named after Glaucus?
Maybe he is a merman.
Merman.
But basically they're saying that dude's all like crusty and manky and all that sort of thing, but you can't see the soul within the man. All you can see is this crusty and manky sort of beastie creature in front of you, but maybe it's got a pure soul or something like that, which you wouldn't necessarily think he's got. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of what they were trying to get to there.
I do think it all starts to tie together his whole system of thought, though, in the sense that, he has those levels of truth, and you have the esoteric truth of that highest level of revelation that through philosophy you can locate, and then under that you've got other levels of truth, and the lowest one is just your sense data and physical reality. So you can kind of see that sort of all building up to this, because he almost basically says, because when he's talking about, and I might be interpreting this wrong, but my understanding of it is he's talking about how the soul can be conflicted in this life. And he pretty much associates that with it being attached to the material world, to the physical world. So it's almost like this idea that the physical world kind of burdens your soul and drags it down and dirties it and makes you and sort of almost sullies the soul. So kind of like, material reality is almost like almost like a type of evil, whereas the soul, the highest, the soul is kind of the good kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he then finishes up by saying, that's why you have to look to the soul's love of wisdom, which just plays back into his whole thing. You want to leave the cave and go and look out into the sunshine, because that's the
Yeah.
ultimate reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, but it also just ties in with his agenda that philosopher kings and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
The fact that you could sort of look at the soul's love of wisdom as the way of, I suppose, like measuring the capability the quality of the soul, I suppose. Yeah, there's a little bit on that too, so I may as well read that since we're here too.
Yeah, go for it.
But not there, Glaucon. Not there must we look. Where then? At her love of wisdom. Let us see whom she affects, and what society and converse she seeks in virtue of her near kindred with the immortal and eternal and divine. Also, how different she would become if wholly following this superior principle, and borne by a divine impulse out of the ocean in which she now is, and disengaged from the stones and shells and things of earth and rock, which in wild variety spring up around her, because she feeds upon the earth, and is overgrown by the good things of this life, as they are termed. Then you would see her as she is, and know whether she have one shape only or many, or what her nature is, of her affections and of the forms which she takes in this present life. I think that we have now said enough. So I think that's kind of speaking also to Rubes, like the fact that he's sort of purporting that the soul may have gone through a couple of times and be learning along the way and have had multiple forms and
which is where he starts to touch on that in the myth that he's about to tell.
So I think that's just kind of what he's sort of setting up to. I think the thing is, like with the story and the myth we're talking about, it's very much presupposed information, and I think that's why we're getting this sort of flavor coming through on this stuff, because the story is taken as fact. So
yeah, it's taken as fact, and it's just it's the common thing. It's like I don't know what Christianity is for the West at the moment, or that sort of thing.
There, yeah.
So really, what they're saying is like they'd have no idea what the soul would look like, but just concluding it'd be different to what the body that it's currently in looks like. But if you saw its pursuit of wisdom or knowledge, you might have a inkling towards its true nature or something like that.
Do you think it's kind of like...
It makes sense too. It makes sense too of his whole, Socrates' whole, like, why would you chase wealth and money and things like that? The dude walks around without, we don't know. He walks around without shoes. That's our joke. We say the dude just walks around without shoes. You know what I mean? Like, because to him, if you can tell that what he's saying here, he really believes it and he really lives it.
Yeah. Yeah, like he totally practices what he preaches.
Yeah, exactly. That's why he just sort of would trot around Athens and tell people and try to find the truth and help people find the truth and all that sort of stuff. Because to him, he's like, that is the ultimate reality kind of thing. That's the most valuable thing.
Yeah. No, that's true. They basically wrap it up at that point. They feel like that's kind of a conclusion. He says that he's fulfilled the conditions of the argument, and he just now wants to kind of talk about the rewards and glories of justice.
I think for this bit, you got to remember way back from the start where the idea that if you're doing something, if you're doing the right thing because you want the material reward, that you're then not doing it because it's good within itself. You're not being good because being good is a good thing. You're being good because you want something else. Yeah, so they've come full circle and all the way back here again. And he's like, well, now we can talk about what the rewards are because we've established that, justice is a good thing in itself.
Yeah, and he specifically calls out that it's not the rewards as called out in the stories of Homer and Hesiod, and that these are the real rewards that justice of our own nature is going to show for the soul. So he calls out, or I'm calling this his victory palm dance, because he's calling these things the palms of victory for each one that he sort of notches up. So he's got three. So let's kick off with
Well,
victory palm number one.
before we do, I
Yep.
just want to make special mention, given our episode title last week was that Socrates prefers Tolkien over George R. R. Martin, that
let's go there.
he immediately says that let a man do what is just, whether he have the ring of Gyges or not, and even if in addition to the ring of Gyges he puts on the helmet of Hades. It's another Lord of the Rings reference. There's the ring of power once again.
Yeah,
Absolutely loves some
Yeah.
Tolkien.
You're not wrong. You got it in one.
We have found that justice is itself the best thing for our true self, and that we should act justly whether or not we have the ring of Gyges or the cap of invisibility, is the way that my book puts it. I'm guessing
Exactly.
that helmet must be the cap of invisibility. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that going back to that Gollum example that we read months ago.
Yeah. If you can get away with it, why would you still do the right thing? And
This is
Socrates
why.
says, because justice is good within itself, and it will harm your soul.
Yeah.
Correct.
So so then they kick off with this victory palm number one, and like similar as we sort of talking about that ring, they're sort of casting their minds back to the start of the argument as well, where Glaucon originally put forward the argument that the just man should appear unjust, and that the unjust man appears just. I don't know if you guys remember that argument right at the start. And they're saying that the people who obviously look the best are actually the most crooked, and the ones who are actually just. If they look too just, then people will take advantage of them, and they'll get screwed over everywhere. And
Well, that's exactly what Socrates says.
yeah,
He says that to him.
Yeah.
Where is it? And now, Glaucon, there will be no harm in further enumerating how many and how great are the rewards which justice and the other virtues procure from the soul, gods, and men, both in life and after death. Certainly not. Will you repay me then what you borrowed in the argument? What did I borrow? The assumption that the just man should appear unjust, and the unjust just. For you are of opinion that even if the true state of the case could not possibly escape the eyes of gods and men, still this admission ought to be made for the sake of the argument, in order that pure justice might be weighed against pure injustice. Do you remember? I should be much to blame if I had forgotten. What does that mean? I should be much to blame if I had forgotten. Like, yeah, it's my fault if I've forgotten. You did forget, because you're like, what did I borrow?
this is just how these two, that's just how they roll, right?
How many Krakens in is he by this stage? Like, I feel like he's 8 Krakens in, and he's like, what did I say? Huh?
He's just so bamboozled by Socrates. He's like, well, whatever you're saying, man. Let's get this. Let's get this.
Sure, I said that.
Yeah.
Is it is that whole bit is a really simple way to say that basically for the sake of the argument, Socrates just accepted that if you're a good person, people will think you're bad, and if you're a bad person, people will think you're good. And he's saying, well, that's not always the case, and let's dispel with that.
Maybe I felt he was wanting to defend justice, and he's like, I can't let that slide. Now that we've exposed everything and gone through everything, we need to revisit that statement because that statement's bollocks. Yeah,
I think that's exactly that. Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're doing.
The statement being that the just person will appear unjust, and vice versa.
Well, just saying that they shouldn't, that shouldn't be the case, and that now that we understand justice, we should all be champions of justice, more or less, and we should be out there supporting the just man and shouting down the unjust man, and be superheroes of truth and justice and all that sort of thing. I think there's something they sort of said here. Since she has been shown to confer reality and not to deceive those who truly possess her, let what has been taken from her be given back, that so she may win that palm of appearance, which is hers also, which she gives to her own. So more or less, he's just sort of saying, it should stand on its own 2 feet, that a just person who speaks truth and is honest should be given respect, I suppose. And it's ridiculous that they should be called stupid for being just, because that's basically what they sort of said in the original at the start of the book.
Yeah,
was that if you look like you're too straight, you're an idiot.
Yeah, well, that was the whole Ring of Gaijus thing. It was like, well, I mean, if you can get away with doing bad things, you're an idiot if you don't.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what Thrasymachus and God, I can't remember who the other guy was now right at the start, but
Adamantus?
No.
Isn't that Wolverine's medal?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
No, I know that's adamantium for all those nerds out there.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Anyway, that one was wrapped up, and then it's
well,
on to...
Excitingly, they move on to something about justice. Shocking.
Victory palm number 2.
So I'm gonna read this paragraph.
Do it.
Which is exciting. I've underlined part of it in red because I'm like, here's some of the punchline we've been searching for the last 20 plus weeks. Then this must be our notion of the just man, that even when he is in poverty or sickness or any other seeming misfortune, all things will in the end work together for good to him in life and death. For the gods have a care of anyone whose desire is to become just and to be like God, as far as man can attain the divine likeness by the pursuit of virtue. Yes, he said, if he is like God, he will surely not be neglected by him. Interesting.
Yeah, you're going to talk about that
God.
Bible verse that sounds like it almost pretty much... It's very close to a Bible verse, almost.
It is. Okay. It is. I had the same thought, Reuben, but I don't have it at hand. Do you have it at hand?
I don't. It's the verse is something to the effect of all things work together for good for them that love God and are called according to his purpose.
That's pretty good.
If you punch it into Google, you'll find out where the verse is. I can't remember where it is off my head, but very, very similar. I don't know whether you had any thoughts on that, Tim.
Is it Romans 8:28? Here we go. Of Bible Gateway, thank you. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose.
Yeah, that's it. I think the one I was quoting is probably King James.
Sure.
I like ye olde English.
I'm a big fan of King James. I've had it for 15 years, but this year I've decided to switch to the Catholic version.
Interesting.
Mainly because there's books in there that I've never read before, because they're not in the one that we use. There's more than 66 books in the Catholic Bible, so I'm reading those on the side.
Yeah. So what did you think about the parallel there, if there is any at all?
I was very interested by that. It kind of just feels similar to what I've noticed in previous weeks, where if you think this through rationally, what's true reveals itself, and so it feels not surprising, but pleasant to see.
You're finding then, I guess you're saying, is that you feel it's common because you feel it's true, right? That's what you're sort of saying.
Yeah, I think Ruben and I have talked about this before. I'm not sure if you're in the conversation or like, I can't recall, but like we basically discussed, if every single copy of the Bible was destroyed, would what is written in Scripture reappear somehow? And my conclusion is truth remains true whether it's written or not. And so if you then use your God-given mind to think things through, then you'll get, like with the right spirit and the right heart, for lack of a better word, then you should get to, maybe not exactly verbatim the same truths, but you'll get to the truth. So if the truth is true, then it should appear regardless of where it's written if you're seeking the truth. Does that make sense? I don't want to say something heretical either, because I'm not a minister, but I certainly don't want to overstep the mark here and accidentally make an apologist argument for all things are the same elephant. But
sure.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts?
But you're saying that if it's okay, you can't say it's universally true, but if it's true, and it is true, well, it would be universally true.
Hang on, here's an example. Two guys invented my understanding is two guys invented diesel as a fuel at roughly the same time, but one guy patented it first, and that's why it's called diesel and not something else. They both discovered the same thing, and they both discovered it would work, and it's the same formula, but they discovered it at different parts of the world through different channels, but they got to the same fact, like the same thing. And they were separated by distance and time, and whoever got to the patent place first. Both of them found the same truth. I think it's a similar thing, which is why I think when Socrates really thinks through what does the just man look like, he essentially describes what happened to Jesus in the Bible, where he gets crucified and killed for being the just man. He basically finds the same conclusion through thinking it through rationally, because I believe the universe is a rationally made thing. So I think rational thought gets you to truth. What Ruben, do you want to? Am I going into dangerous territory here, or what are your thoughts?
No. I think the same thing as you. I probably just use different words to say the same thing. Like you said, if something's true, it makes sense. Like if something's Lachlan said if something's universally true, but I think if something is really true, then it is universally true. And so if something is universally true, then it makes sense that people would be landing on that same note throughout history from different perspectives. And that's like, you even see that sort of these days in scientific thinking, or even journalistic thinking or history, when you find different people coming to the same conclusion from different either data sets or different worldviews, and they're all coming in and landing on the same thing, I think that's usually a pretty strong indicator that there's some truth there. And I think it just makes sense too.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that. I don't know if that answered the original. I don't even recall the original question.
Makes sense. Makes sense to me. Yeah.
All right, cool. That was a bit of a tangent. Anyway,
love it, tangent.
Well, so does Socrates, right?
They've got a third palm, the final victory palm.
Oh, what's this one?
Wait, what was the second palm?
That was the second palm. So it was the rewards of God rewarding the just.
Yeah.
So we're good on that one.
Which is the third palm?
So the third one was really. I'll cut this one short because we've been sort of talking quite a lot. But this is actually sort of harking back right to the very start of the book when they were talking to Paul Marcus's. That's who I was trying to think of before, I think. Paul Marcus's father, Cephalus. They don't actually talk about this, but this is kind of the example they're giving. And Socrates was talking to him about, like he's an old man and he's getting towards the end of his life, and they're talking about how he feels and that sort of thing, and how he's calm and has peace because he's done no wrongs against anyone else. He has no debts outstanding to anyone else, and he's lived a good and fulfilling life. And I guess it's about having peace in your soul, in your mind, that you have led a good life and done the right thing. And essentially, he's sort of saying that the people who've done the wrong thing are going to be tortured into old age, and those things are going to manifest in their dreams or whatever it may well be. So the just man will have a clear conscience, and that's kind of the third reward by the sound of it. You got something there, Tim?
Yeah.
I just started smiling because I just read a thing and it just stood out like crazy because I've been watching Boba Fett it says, "And this is the way." For just, and I was just like, "This is the way."
This is the way.
But
You no,
Yeah.
I think I had the exact same thought as you, Lachlan, when I read that bit. It brought me back, and I thought it was amusing because it was like he's almost gone through this entire book and just come back smack bang and
Prove that
landed
first argument.
almost where the old bloke right at the start. Remember the old bloke right at the start said, this is what it is, and then he just kind of walked off.
Laughingly
the
walked
old man
off to
was
leave
right.
you boys to the argument. Yeah.
without a
It's
care.
it's almost like, yeah, it's like almost like you should have just listened to the old bloke at the start. We could have saved ourselves a lot of talking.
Totally.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what it's like, and he does. He walks off without a care, and leaves them to figure it out. It's so brilliant.
I actually have a theory, Timmy. I don't know whether we want to go into it now, but you just raised it now, like with that whole "this is the way" thing,
Yep.
as to why the Mandalorian is good, whereas most of the other Star Wars movies that have been made prior to that were more or less rubbish.
As in, since Star Wars 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because Mandalorian's stoic. No, I'm joking.
No. It's close, but I think even more profoundly, I think what they've done. The problem with all those other Star Wars is they've tried to make it very materialistic, and they went into like, what was it? Those things that you could measure someone's DNA and see if they're a Jedi.
Midichlorians.
Metachlorians, all that rubbish, and I think what they've done is they've actually sucked the soul out of the story. But when you come back to like things like the Mandalorian, and he's talking about this is the way, and the dude's got like he's got like a purpose, and he's got like a code. Like I think that automatically then points back towards like a transcendent idea that ties the story together, and I think that's why the later Star Wars has got good again, because they've disregarded all that rubbish and they've gone back to something that's a lot more like the first couple of movies.
It's also because they're consulting directly with George Lucas and he's not getting interference. But because he knows mythology very well, man. He did a lot of uni work on mythology and he knows his stuff. And even, like, I know I bag out the prequels, like 1, 2, and 3, but I'm telling you, they've aged actually quite well, particularly the third one. I remember when I first watched it, I was like, man, that happened really fast and it doesn't make sense. But it's brilliant. It is brilliant. And I don't know. I think you guys should rewatch the third one. And now that we've spent time in philosophy and mythology, because it is pretty amazing. It's well written, I think. I mean, the dialogue could have been more polished, but the ideas are pretty good. Much better than 7, 8, 9.
But I think when you talk about mythology, I think that's what it is. It's that transcendent. That's something that's greater than just the material sort of just action sort of storytelling. It's sort of, there's a greater meaning there. That's probably a good way to put it. Greater meaning, which I think is kind of very Socratic. I mean, that's what he keeps banging on about. He's like, yeah. The material world is all very good, but there's a greater meaning beyond that.
I will point out though, he kept the Beskar, right? after he goes back and slays the bad guy, he still kept the Beskar, right?
True, but
parking. I'm not familiar enough with.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
They all hate you, Mando. Look at them.
I will say, since I've read Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning, every movie I watch has changed how I watch it. That book is amazing. It's very complicated though. I ain't doing that book on this show. Too hard. But I think I might actually get that for you guys in the near future, a copy each, because that book, it changed the way I look at almost everything that's presented to me through media, of any media, like music, books, movies. That one book really made me think differently.
Interesting. I'm skeptical. I'll check it out.
It's worth it. It's worth the read. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the part I was alluding to at the start, which is Socrates bags out people who tell stories, and then at the end of this chapter goes, "Well, I will tell you a tale." Not one of the tales which Odysseus tells to the hero Alcinous, yet this too is a tale of a hero. The son of Amenius, a Pamphylian by birth, he was slain in battle, and 10 days afterwards, when the bodies of the dead were taken up already in a state of corruption, his body was found unaffected by decay and carried away home to be buried. And on the 12th day, as he was lying on the funeral pile, he returned to life and told them what he had seen in the other world.
So basically, dude dies, goes to the afterlife, learns a bunch of stuff, and comes back.
Did he die, or was he just knocked out? Like, was he in a coma?
He was
No,
dead.
he was dead.
That is the
Yeah.
story.
Dead, bro. Yeah.
Just by way of background, this story, it's a well-known story in those ancient Greek times. So it's not something new that Socrates or Plato, for that matter, is kind of rolling out. It's a story that's got its own sort of basis. So
was it a story like Homer, or was it like I was alluding to before, where it was like a known event?
It's written about in the same way that Zeus and the gods are written about. So as though it is a known event, but who knows where those stories came from? They were obviously an oral tradition at some point in time, and the stories have been passed down. So
yeah,
but it's a commonly held story from that time. So
you do raise an interesting point there to me, though. I mean, is he, by saying, "Yeah, this bloke died and came back, and this is what he said," is he trying to put it on a slightly higher level than the poets? Is he kind of say,
well, I think so.
You got poetry, and this guy's kind of like saying this is witness testimony.
I think he is, because he says that he will say, "I'll tell you a tale, but not one of the tales which Odysseus tells to the hero." Like he's definitely trying to say
not just some poem.
Yeah.
Because he knows if he admits that it's some poem,
he's going to get wrecked. He's going to get wrecked hard. It's like, well done for completely removing the credibility of your source material.
Yeah, I mean, if it was written by Homer or something, I mean, he's just been junking all of that, even though he says it's a ripping good read, but it's bullshit, you know. I think he's definitely putting it out there as something factual.
Yeah, let me read. This is a note that came in my book. It's actually quite helpful. But this concluding section is a dialogue. This concluding section of the dialogue is cast in the form of a myth, as is Plato's habit when he wishes to convey religious or moral truths, for which plain prose is inadequate. Much of the details are borrowed from contemporary sources, like Lachlan was saying. So yeah, I think that's probably a good way to frame it. And I was thinking, there are other times where he sort of does that, like, with his thing of the cave, and that one about the boat and the captain. So when he wants to sort of explain something that he can't really explain in straight language, he does sort of resort to these stories, which I think you're right, Tim, raises the whole question of, well, are you just basically doing what the poets do, really?
Yeah, I still feel like, based on the context of him just sledging people for half a chapter, I feel like he feels that this story has credibility. And it could be because maybe he feels the person who reported these things is like the person that builds the chair, in that they've actually done it. They've died and then come back. And so he's like, okay, because they've actually died for 12 days, what they say has knowledge because they did it. Whereas I haven't done that, you haven't done that, but this dude died and now he's back, so he's the guy to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, just as far as like credibility of this story goes, it's a bit of a spoiler because we haven't sort of gotten into it, I suppose. But the more
I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, who are the
I don't think we have to shout out spoiler alerts for a two and a half
no,
thousand year
that's
old
it.
book.
It's 2,500 years old. If you haven't worked it out by now.
Yeah.
Um, the Morai are the sort of deities who are involved in this afterlife sort of story, and they are said to be the daughters of Zeus, actually. So they are part of the religious backbone of this thing. So it is an established part of their existing religious structure for sure. So
Yeah.
so I think that's why he can speak so confidently to it as being factual.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, gotcha. So what
Um,
is this myth?
yeah,
What is this little story? What happens to this bloke after he dies?
It's like reincarnations, sort of things in a way. So like
totally.
yeah. So he goes and sees, and I'm talking my backside here, but I think I understand. But if I'm wrong, just overrule. But I think he goes to like a heaven place and sees people who have served out their judgment of like 1,000 years. So they did things right, they got heaven for 1,000 years. If they did things wrong, they got hell for 1,000 years. And then they sort of come back out to this neutral place and then get to choose where they go for their next life. So it's kind of like a purgatory or heaven, and then after a time you get to be reincarnated.
Yeah, there's a really, I think what you're saying there about that sort of 1,000 times thing, that's worth talking about quickly too, because that's just, I think that's part of the backbone for why um, Socrates and Plato are kind of like trying to push, why you should be just in this life, whether someone's watching or not,
Yeah.
because when you get to that place, your soul will be weighed more or less for the good deeds and the bad deeds that you've done. And as Tim's saying, for every bad deed you've done, you get, was it 10 times or 1,000 times, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think
I
you have
think
to
this is
pay it back
also
a
why
thousand times.
this is also why the immortality of the soul is essential to this system.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely, because it's cyclical. So if you've done the wrong thing, you're going to get this 1,000 years of time in hell. Otherwise, if you've done all the right things, you might get the 1,000 years in heaven. And as Tim says, you're coming back to this middle ground, and you get to have another go. And so that's where the souls are going to get sort of reincarnated and have an opportunity to do play out another life. It's interesting the way they sort of talked about that. And look, we're not diving in too much. If you want to read this part, there's some really interesting and detailed, I suppose, like scene setting that goes on. It's not like super important to the story that we're sort of telling here, but it is interesting. So that's sort of where these fates, which are the three sort of goddesses, one of the past, one of the present, one of the future, and it's the goddess of the past who sort of has she allots what is it, ballots or what have you, and the souls that are there waiting get to select one, and that just sort of forms the order. And then there seems to be, it's almost like there's like cards of potential lives lying out in front of you, and the person who's got the first one gets to go out and go through all of the lives and pick which one that they want to go for. And I think this is where it got sort of interesting. They're talking about how much experience the soul had and whether it had had a rough
what
experience
bearing that had
previously.
on what they chose.
Yeah. And that a soul who's had kind of like a cushy life without, much experience. And funny enough, he actually drew a sort of parallel around living in a state, like a well-performing state, where they didn't have to think too hard about being morally right because they were in a good state that had foundations to have them traveling the right way, right? So it was almost by default. He's saying like some souls might get like a sweet run and do all the right things just because their environment is good.
They're in the right society, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then saying, oh, then they got like a sweet gig going to heaven for a period of time, come back, and then they go pick a ballot, and then maybe
they would choose badly.
Yeah, they choose badly because they don't understand that maybe one of these lives, it's kind of like rich or famous or whatever, comes with its complexity that has you walking a path that might be hard to be a just or honest person. And
Yeah, so that
that
they
was
haven't
really
actually.
interesting.
Yeah, I found it interesting. Like where basically they just do the right thing out of habit, not because of their philosophy, and that they're missing their philosophy.
Which is
specifically,
why, once
yeah,
again, Socrates is always saying, you have to go and look for the truth yourself. You have to have philosophy if you really want to
Mm.
understand things, because, and this is kind of him saying this is what happens.
But he also alludes to that philosophy is the path to immortality. Did
Yeah.
you guys pick that up?
No, you're going to have to expound that for me.
Yeah, I didn't get that one
So
either.
there's a part where towards the end, before they get reincarnated, they go through the waters where you don't remember.
Yep.
And the
Hold on,
only one.
before you go there,
Yeah.
sorry, before you go there, just to make it clear for people. So you die, you go to this place, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. Once you've served your time, you then get to choose a life. And then once you've chosen your life, they go on this journey to this river where they drink, and then you forget everything, and then you start your new life. Is that right?
Correct.
Well, the journey
Okay.
from start to finish, I think they talk about being 8 days. And I think it was
Yeah.
like the fourth day, they get to that ballot where they get to select their future life. Then they continue that journey. It goes through a desert or something. And so I think the idea is that by the time they get through the desert, they're very thirsty. Then they hit this river of forgetfulness, and they're so thirsty that they drink their fill. And the idea is that the soul kind of forgets all the stuff it knows before it gets drop kicked back into planet Earth and has
And
to
start
find its
again.
way again without all
Yeah.
this
Sorry to interrupt.
foreknowledge.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
So that's exactly right.
You there, Jimmy. Yeah.
But then from that point, the philosopher remembers not to drink too much, and that's his point, right? So if you hang on to the philosophy and you pursue the life that's simple, the philosopher at the end doesn't overdrink.
Well, was that because he was a philosopher? I didn't catch that he was a philosopher. I know he was slain in battle, was what they said, but they didn't call him a philosopher, did they?
Well, I think it's because he's a philosopher. I think he's hinting that if you have true philosophy and you hold on to philosophy, that even in the afterlife, when you come to this pool of forgetfulness, because you hold on to philosophy, you won't lose philosophy.
Yeah, he did specifically mention that he chose not to drink so much. There was some comment like that. I have to find the passage.
Yeah.
All right, look that up, and I think I'll just talk about that because there's another Platonic dialogue where Socrates talks about knowledge, and he basically in that says that you don't learn things anew. What you're doing is actually remembering. So that ties right in, because that's a really weird thing to say.
So I found the passage. But yeah, you're right. So he says, and thus Glaucon, the tale has been saved and has not perished, and will save us if we are obedient to the word spoken, and we shall pass safely over the river of forgetfulness, and our soul will not be defiled.
Damn, dude, I missed that totally.
Yeah,
so
me too.
It's while he's saying the path to all souls are immortal, I think he's saying the path to immortal awareness, maybe, or philosophical immortality is through philosophy.
That's very.
Look, that would make sense in any case. For I think that argument, like you're saying before, Rubes, about sort of like knowledge and enlightenment being at the top of that totem pole in any case, because that's about sort of connection with the soul and connection to your true being. So finding that inner truth and hidden knowledge that he believes you already possessed in your soul, I guess from the previous lives.
Yeah, interesting. No, I didn't. That's not something I picked up on, Timmy. I'll have to have another read of that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. It's the very last paragraph of the book. And it's like, oh my god damn it, I want more, where's the rest?
The other interesting thing with this, because I found it a little bit contradictory, was that these goddesses, they're known as the Fates, and essentially those lives that they're selecting from are what is fated to you, right? So it is it's a written foretelling of what your future is going to be. And I found that sort of a bit difficult because I was like, what, if they already know what the future is on that card, are you deciding to be a just man or an unjust man? Or
Oh,
is it that?
straight into the free will versus predestination topic.
Well, that's just kind of what it sort of sounded like. Or are they sort of saying, like, basing on what you were just talking about there, Tim, maybe the true philosopher, because they don't go through those rivers of forgetfulness, is actually able to break their fate in a sense because they can see the real truth and can seek justice, even if they sort of pick a bad jam, I suppose, from the deck of cards of life.
Yeah.
I just found that really interesting.
Well, I thought, yeah, that was one of the things I highlighted too, because he does say in there, I can't find the quote, but he basically says in there, and this is why you can't blame the gods for your misfortune, because you had a
Yes.
choice.
Yeah, yeah.
Which that's pretty interesting because that's one of those things that gets discussed throughout the ages, isn't it?
Yeah, that
sure.
sounds very
For sure.
familiar about who's that guy? Who's that guy? Who wrote he was in the Nazi, was it the Nazi camp or the Russian camp? Peterson
Viktor
talks
Frankl
about him. Maybe.
or Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
That's him. He came to the conclusion that it was his fault that he was where he was, rather than
Yeah.
those
Well,
who captured him.
when he says he means collectively, as in the reason that things got as bad as they did in Russia is because everyone didn't speak the truth, kind of thing. But him included.
But yeah, he took it like ownership
anyway.
of that, personal ownership of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really interesting thing too.
There's some massive things right at the end here, eh? Like they're big ideas.
Yeah. There was another bit that I highlighted too. Before I forget, I was going to mention it. Like he has a list of things that people go to hell for, and I thought it was an interesting list because he throws in there people who have or cast others into slavery. So I know we were talking about slavery about 10,000 episodes ago. So yeah, he puts that as someone that would go to hell or Hades or whatever they call it. And I'll just read the bit I highlighted.
Go for
and
it.
he describes the even greater penalties and rewards for those who had honoured or dishonoured gods or their parents or committed murder. So he's got a couple of kind of really high-end crimes there. And really high-end crimes, like dishonouring the gods, your parents, or committing murder. So they're kind of like his top three. So I thought that was interesting too.
And slavery.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, slavery kind of wasn't. Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. They threw slavery.
Well, slavery is interesting.
Betraying the state or the army.
I think slavery is interesting, given it's such a common occurrence in that time. That's a really interesting call out. I mean, right at the very start of the book, you've got Paul Marcus's slave chasing after Glaucon and Socrates, telling them to stop on their way to the festival because they wanted to divert them to their place.
Yeah.
So present company. Sorry, boys, you're going to hell.
I feel like he dropped it right at the end there when most people have nodded off and all left the room.
Gone to the bar.
Yep. It's just like and slavery.
Right at the end. Kind of a sneaky.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So I mean, I think there's some really interesting concepts there.
There's too much. There's just too much there for us to do it any real justice. Like Lachlan said, anyone listening to this, just go read it. You've just got to do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of detail in that story. Like I said, not all of it's relevant, but it is interesting. And I must say, it sort of spurned me on to read a bit more about the idea of this as well. Just because I was curious. But what do you think about speaking before about sort of universal truths and things like that? This is obviously like a story that is part of, let's say, their religion at the time, and the parallels maybe about someone being reincarnated and telling them how to save their soul. And
I'll speak to that first. I don't mind. Some of the language felt a bit like Revelation, and Old Testament.
The rings within the rings and that stuff.
Yeah, it felt very familiar, that sort of stuff. But the reincarnation was obviously a little bit foreign for me. But
for sure.
Yeah, it's.
But I thought maybe the story of this particular dude dying and then coming back
from the
to
dead.
life. Yeah, 10 days later to tell you
the resurrection aspect.
Yeah.
It's about 7 days too long for my liking. So
yeah. They measured time differently back then. I don't know. But,
well, yeah, I don't know. Like, what am I thinking about that? I don't know. There's plenty of examples, even 100 or 200 years ago, of digging up coffins where people have woken up inside. The fact that he was found on a battleground, they thought he's dead, and then wakes up later. It could have been coma, could have been something. I don't know. It's the only time I've ever heard of it is from this book, so I've got very, very small amount of information about it. So
no, for sure.
I'd certainly look into it more.
Can I just do a quick shout out before I forget? There's a bloke on the Facebook page for the Republic of Middle-Aged Men, Frederick Husband, linked something a little bit earlier about a Buddhist monk being dug up to be redressed, and they found him smiling. So that kind of it was a really interesting little YouTube thing too, because I think the Buddhists are right into the reincarnation type view too, aren't they?
Yeah, big time. I mean, the Christian faith doesn't say that there's not an afterlife. Like, we go into what the Bible says. It's like you go to heaven and you get what they call a spiritual body. I don't know exactly what that would look like. Probably my preference would be less grey hairs, but maybe they're all white and shining. I don't know. But there's still like a second round, so to speak, of existence, but it's not the same. It's very different. Whereas this seems to be like have another round and then have another round, and I want to look into more how that works in regards to the broader Greek mythology of the time, because am I right in saying that man was created by Zeus or Poseidon? One of the three, right?
I don't know.
And I don't think. All right, I'm for anyone listening, I'm winging it here, probably talking out of my butt.
That's what we do.
My kind of understanding of Greek, as if it's any different from any other time in this podcast. I think one of the things that's not unique, but similar with Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology, I think they all kind of had this idea of like the demiurge. So I think they all kind of believe that the universe is eternal, and then it's cyclical. It goes through different stages. So I think that's distinctly different from the Christian conception, which is that God is eternal, but the universe was created by God, so the universe itself is not eternal.
I just looked up the creation of man in Greek mythology.
Oh, okay.
So Prometheus shaped man out of mud, and Athena breathed life into his clay figure.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
So that would imply not eternal, because it had a beginning.
No. But the matter that they used to create the people was already there, And like I said, once again, I'm totally winging it, but I think like that understanding is that there's something that makes up the gods, and the gods come out of that thing, and then that thing creates order out of that demiurge, that thing that's already existed, the universe.
Yeah, that's the problem with eternity. Let me explain. Right, so if you're born today, and then someone's born in a week, and you both are immortal and live eternally, then who's older? Like, that's the problem with eternity.
Well,
because it's infinite, right? It just keeps going, and keeps going, and keeps going.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but the other one's still always going to be a couple of days older, right?
there's a firstborn, yeah, but like, okay, let me put it. Maybe I'm not putting that the right way. Like, all right. So let's talk biblical stories. So biblical stories are Abraham's in heaven, right? So let's say Abraham's in heaven, and then Peter's in heaven, and they both live for eternity in heaven. Does that make Abraham older, even though they're both now eternal?
Well, this is interesting because this came up earlier in the chapter, and I left it alone because I was like, I'm not going there. I'm going there. Okay. So Socrates actually addresses this, because I'm just going to read it, because otherwise I don't know whether I can.
Yeah, good call.
So, okay, we can take that then as proven, and he's talking about that whole thing about, what can kill a thing, something else that can kill that thing can't kill a thing. That's not clear, but we can take it then that's proven, I said. And if so, it follows that the same souls have always existed. Their number cannot be decreased, because the soul can die, because no soul can die, nor can it increase. Any increase in the immortal must be at the expense of mortality. And if that were possible, everything would in the end be immortal. And then Glaucon says, true. But that is something which our argument forbids us to believe. So, I mean, without going into too much detail, is Socrates essentially saying immortal means eternal? Like, are those two terms, do they mean the same thing in Socrates' mind?
Maybe.
We
need to
because
look at the original Greek.
Yeah. And because that was what I got hung up on the first time I read through it, because I didn't really understand his argument at that point, where he's like, well, if something can't die, it's immortal. And if it's immortal, the numbers can't increase or decrease. And I think he's right. If something is eternal, well, what these days the term eternal would mean there's no start and no end, right? Well, then the numbers of those eternal things can't increase and decrease. So that just gets... No, my head's spinning, man. You go.
No, well, I was going to say, do you think that's why so many species of animals have to go extinct, because humans keep breeding?
I was actually thinking the exact same thing, in that the correlation of population growth could be offset by the reduction in animal growth. Because we should say, there's something we didn't talk about in the story as well, that there were people or souls that would choose
to be animals.
To come back.
That's right.
Yeah, chose to come back as animals rather than people. Yeah.
So, the hippies are right. We need to have less people. Otherwise, we keep making people go extinct.
Well, yeah, their religion was seeing them sacrificing animals on altars to the gods, which are souls just like them, right, in their own religion, which I find, amazing, that in a way that they weren't all like vegetarian. But
well,
I don't know.
No, but we're laughing, but you're right. Like, I mean, is Socrates right? If souls are eternal, and I'm using that word in conjunction with immortal, then the numbers can't change, and they must exist. Every living creature must have some kind of immortal soul, and then is that essentially, like, that's the, what do you call it? I think they call it the pantheistic worldview kind of thing.
But do you is this where we get in now to that territory of, is consciousness the soul, or is the soul separate to consciousness?
That's a different argument right
That's
there.
a whole nother show, I think.
Well, I think those are more modern distinctions. I'm not sure they're applicable. I mean, I'm not saying they're not applicable, but I'm just saying.
I'm not sure. I think Genesis makes it pretty clear that Adam could find no suitable helper, no suitable partner, and that he required Eve because none of the other animals are like a person.
Yeah, but the term consciousness is contemporary in terms of and I think I agree with you in the sense that I think that's what makes the Christian worldview unique, because souls are immortal, they last forever, but they're not eternal like Socrates is suggesting. They have a start point. I get what you're saying. I think that is the difference. I think that's the difference that we're looking at between, I guess the Christian idea of souls and the Socratic and the pantheistic and those other sort of ideas. Once again, sorry everyone, I'm winging it here.
But I think you're onto something. Like I make the distinction between consciousness and soul probably because I've been listening to too much Joe Rogan when they talk about artificial intelligence and trying to figure out what consciousness is. But when I read soul in like the biblical text, I immediately just think of consciousness because I perceive that it's God breathing His spirit into man, then results in consciousness, i.e., soul.
Well, what if? Because I just saw it. I must admit, I didn't read the article, but I saw something just pop up somewhere. And they're talking about like basically uploading your consciousness into AI.
Yes, I've been reading about that for a couple of years. I've been looking at that for a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Musk has taken it a step further with his Neuralink. He's saying that you can save versions of your consciousness, so you'll be able to have a 2021 version and then a 2024 version.
Have you guys seen Altered
the greatest
Carbon?
hits?
I haven't seen Altered Carbon, no.
It's actually one of my favorite books.
Carbon, bro.
Read the book. Don't watch the show. Read the book.
All right. I'll get a hold of it. Maybe we can do that for our next book club.
It's
from The Republic to Altered Carbon.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's a smooth transition after their conversation tonight because it's
maybe.
Altered Carbon. The whole idea is that you can upload your consciousness.
Yeah, they realize space travel is inefficient, and so that it's more efficient to download your consciousness and beam your consciousness into another body on the other side of the universe than to transmit your body.
Well,
yeah, they can just produce bodies. What do you call it? Like grow them in vats, and then you just put your consciousness into the body.
Star Trek actually figured that out. Yeah. In Star Trek, when you get beamed, you're not the same body. It's reconstructing your body's particles on the other side. So you get destroyed on one side and recreated on the other. And that was a Star Trek idea back from 50 years ago or whatever it was. So,
wait, did Willy Wonka predate Star Trek?
He might have.
I don't think so.
Because they talked about that in Willy Wonka.
Okay. No, I want to say Shatner was there first. In fact, I have. Give me a second.
Do you know what? It's probably similar times because was the characters in Willy Wonka is like that kid Jimmy TV or something or other, and he's like watching westerns on the TV. Yeah. So probably similar era.
Just above.
We apologise, listeners. This has probably been one of the longest and most rambly episodes we've ever done for
but it's good. It's good. One. So up above my desk here, I have a Bird of Prey and the USS Enterprise model, and I also have my box set of season 1 of Star Trek of the original series.
Of course.
So
I can't tell you my true thoughts on Star Trek because they're just not appropriate for public discourse. And then they're all negative, just to be clear.
Well, I'm trying to see when it was actually originally recorded. I thought it might say it on the box for me.
It'd be 60s. But...
Do you know why I bought this? I got this because I was away for work once a few years ago in this hotel, and they actually had a decent TV. It was like a 50-inch TV.
Hold on. Before you go any further, what is this? Because people may not be watching the video.
The very first season of Star Trek ever.
Right. Okay.
And it came up on this 50-inch plasma, I think it was, TV. And the special effects were hilarious. That it was literally one of the aliens. You could see it was a green sock with a guy's hand in it, with some like decorations on there, and that was one of the alien plants. And then I saw Kirk fight this giant dinosaur thing in like this Mortal Kombat fight, and I'm like, this is the funniest show I've ever seen.
It's,
and I bought the whole box set just to watch it in laughter.
it's like WWE, because like it was all those total wrestling moves all the way through.
Yeah, double hand punch, hammer fist. Yep. It was mad.
Yep.
So don't watch it.
So we should point out that Tim is a closet Shatner music fan, which it's a special thing all the time.
I'm not closet about my Shatner fandom for music.
Hey, I'm gonna put you out of your misery. So, Series 1 Star Trek came out in 1966, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book came out in 1964.
Whoa! There you go. It was first.
There you go.
Good call.
You heard it here, guys. J.R.R. Tolkien is better than George R.R. Martin, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is better than Star Trek.
Well, I think there was probably more drugs used in Willy Wonka, so they probably came to the idea first, which seems to be a common theme for most scientific brain breakthroughs at the moment.
I'm sure there's equal levels of drugs, just different types.
Yeah. It's all the 60s.
Oh, gosh.
Well, boys,
on that bombshell.
I hate to pull everyone up. I think we're in the weeds.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
So next episode, just before we wrap up, I want to revisit what we think the key learnings were from each chapter. Maybe spend 2 to 5 minutes per chapter, key learnings, just to sort of go, we learnt this, and then we learnt this, and learnt this, to summarise what we've learnt, and also maybe just discuss like if this book has changed you in any way or made you change your thinkings. And I think it'll be a good episode, and then we've got to figure out what the heck we're going to read next. That's the fun part.
Open suggestions. If anyone actually listens to this and wants to throw suggestions onto the Facebook page, we'll consider it.
For sure.
Exactly.
I've certainly got my ideas, but like I said, I chose the first one, so fair's fair.
Well, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, gentlemen. What an extraordinary amount of time this took. When we first set out, we said 10 weeks. Months later, we got it. So thanks for sticking with me and getting through it. And I really appreciate it. And for those listening, thanks for sticking with us. And remember, the Republic wasn't built in a day, and neither middle-aged men, neither was reading this book. But we got through it. So we'll see you next time. Bye.